Welcome, everybody. My name's Colton from Zim2 Capital. Today I'm here with Chris Grove, President of Commerce Resources. Chris, thanks for coming.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So you recently released some news yesterday regarding the final drill hole of the 2022 drill program. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more. What was the goal of this program and where can we look for the future?
I'm very happy to do so. Ultimately, more drilling on a deposit that is as advanced as the Ashram would essentially be meaningless were it not for the fact that we already have the right style of geology and the most attractive mineralogy. So ultimately, when you are able to tick off those two most important boxes, you have the right geology, carbonatite hosted, seconded by the most attractive mineralogy, which is monazite, then you actually have something very exciting to talk about when you have then drilled more in your drilling program, which we just did and which we just announced the completion of the program for this summer 2022 program. Ultimately, if you have the right geology and the right mineralogy, then more of that material is extremely significant. So even before this new resource is released with the pre-feasibility study, let me just point out that we have essentially doubled the drilled data on the deposit, and the deposit as the resource as it was in the preliminary economic assessment a decade ago was based upon 15,000 meters of drilling. We have now added over 15,000 more meters of drilling on this deposit. So the new resource should be in a much higher resource category, more of the 219 million tons in the inferred category into the indicated and the measured categories. And as well, in all of the drilling we've done over the last decade, we've noticed three specific, very important things. One, higher grade intersections, less waste rock at surface, and then mineralogy where we didn't expect to find it. And certainly in this last drilling program, we did a step out hole of 100 meters to the southeast of the Ashram, essentially extending the north-south totality as we understand it at this point in time in terms of the Ashram. So the strike at this point in time is approximately 700 meters from north to south and approximately 300 to 400 meters east to west. And then we have drilled it consistently down to below depths of 600 meters. So you're talking a gargantuan amount of extremely valuable material.
And it keeps getting bigger, it seems.
That's what we just did.
Yeah.
We just extended another 100 meters to the southeast of this deposit. So it's very exciting, actually.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're building out the confidence in this deposit, obviously. If you've been following along with the Ashram deposit, you can see that over time, especially the new economics. And actually, when is that scheduled to kind of come out? I know it's been worked on for a while now, the new economics.
It has. We expect to have the pre-fees ready to be released in Q1 of next year, ideally. And ultimately, to be very brief about this, the Ashram, with its most attractive mineralogy, with its most attractive geology, there are processing options available to the Ashram which do not exist for other projects. Essentially, there's a variability aspect to the processing of the Ashram. So to be very clear, there are basically three different ways that we can process the Ashram material, and understanding which one has the best economics is really somewhat impacting the time frame to release the pre-feasibility study. But ultimately, this is an opportunity for us and our shareholders and the investors in terms of us determining exactly what gives us the best profit margin for the project.
And I know that in the past you've spoken recently about industry majors taking notice and being in communication with them. Is there anything that shareholders can expect on that front, or what can they expect in the next coming months?
Well, 2 weeks ago, we hosted a large American major 2 site. And let me just say, you can see pictures on our website. You can read, the details, the data on what the resource size was in the preliminary economic assessment. But when you land the helicopter on basically somewhere near the center of the starting pit, which would be production for the first 25 years, which represents less than 15% of the total size of the resource as we understand it right now today. And then you walk around for the next couple of hours, 700 meters north to south, 300 to 400 meters east to west, and you realize that basically everything around you is mineralized material. It's very, very compelling, let me put it that way. And so the site visit went great with this American major. I would suggest in the next month we should finally have the samples as requested by 2 industry majors and delivered to them. And then we should be in a position to hopefully start commercial discussions with these different interested industry potential partners.
So going back to the site visit, what sort of things are industry majors looking for when they do a site visit? Is there specific areas of the property you're showing them? Are you showing them any sort of camp, or what are they looking at when they come?
Well, in the case of the ashram or any deposit, ultimately you're going there to essentially verify the fact that it exists and is essentially being represented truthfully by the company working on the project. And certainly in the case of the ashram, as I said, you can read the data, you can see the resource numbers, but when you're actually on the ground and you're walking around and our project manager, Darren Smith, is cracking open the occasional rock or the, many rocks on site. And it's like, oh, this one's mineralized, this one's mineralized, this one's mineralized. It becomes extremely impressive to anyone being there to realize the total size or the potential total size of this resource as we've identified it so far as yet, and as it will be then represented in the pre-feasibility study. Second to that, ultimately you're looking at all of the other aspects of a mining project, whether or not there is any infrastructure, whether or not there is a camp in place, is there any available water? And certainly in terms of an aspect which is extremely fundamentally important for mining is the access to water.
Right.
Now, if you compare the ashram to another deposit that has the right mineralogy and the right geology, for an example, that would be Hastings Yangibana project in Australia. But then in Australia, you are challenged by the lack of water. And there's no shortage of water in Nunavik. And so essentially the whole area around, well, the actual starting pit is essentially half under a very shallow pond, which we would plan to dike off. But there's a pond right there. And then our actual Camp Valcour, is situated about 2 kilometers to the southwest of where the actual ashram deposit is. And Camp Valcour is then on a lake itself called Fox Lake. So there's no shortage of fresh water around, which is part of the extraction process. So an industry major would be looking at the deposit. They would be looking at what other infrastructure needs there are. They would be looking at the availability of water. They would look to see what state the camp is in. And at this point in time, we have and have had for many, many years, a very viable, functioning camp with groundwater systems in place, with pipelines in place to transport diesel to the different vehicles that are needed on site, et cetera, et cetera. So, the major would be looking at all of these aspects.
Right. Yeah, and so it sounds like they like the data to have gotten to that point to look at those sort of things. So that's great to hear. So moving forward, you said there's assays to be expected. Is there anything else that shareholders can look forward to, or is there anything else you wanted to end on?
Well, again, we're one of the, I would say, primary beneficiary of several optimization programs, either financed by Quebec or financed by Canada. And so there will be over time some results coming from these separate provincially and federally funded programs. So we look forward to releasing those results as well. We will have the assays out, as you mentioned. There is still an ongoing backlog at the assay labs, and so I do want to caution or moderate investors' expectations as to when those assays will come out. But in terms of the program itself, which we just wrapped up, The drilling company we had on site was extremely professional, and they were able to actually achieve the drilling of more meters for both Commerce Resources and for Seville. And essentially, the other aspect, which is fundamentally and so important, is that they were drilling basically in carbonatite the entire time. And why that is important is that you can drill through carbonatite much faster than you can drill through any other associated country rock that might be around. So when you're in carbonatite, the drill moves at approximately a foot every 3 or 4 seconds.
Oh, wow.
And it's basically like a hot knife through butter. And so on the one hand, it's very fortunate that the drilling company was drilling in carbonatite essentially the whole time, but that also then allowed them to drill more meters than we had expected.
Absolutely. Well, that's exciting. I know everybody here is keeping a close eye on it, and we'll make sure to have you on as much as possible to give updates like this. So Chris, thanks for coming in, and we'll speak to you shortly.
My pleasure. Thank you, Colton.